All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Today, I'll be talking to Hamza Farrukh, who is Williams class of 2015 and the founder of Bondh-E-Shams. Hamza, welcome.
Hey, thank you very much for having me, Christian.
Hey, yes, thank you for coming. So, just to start off, I'd love if you could just briefly tell us about a little bit about your time at Williams and what you're involved in.
Yeah, sure. So I think I always find these sessions to be very helpful as a way to stay connected to Williams. And whenever I get the opportunity to get involved, I always raise my hand. And I think it's a brilliant program that you guys are running. So my time at Williams was delightful. Like I loved every second of it. There were definitely some hard parts to it, as everybody has in their during their college, but I think from day one I just found some of my best friends who stayed very close to me throughout, um, and you end up forming a little bit of a micro family at Williams, and I had a very similar experience both within the entry and outside. I ended up focusing on political science and economics with a concentration in leadership studies. Part of that coursework took me over to the Williams Exeter program at Oxford, where I spent a year. And it was during that year that I set the foundation for Bondh-E-Shams as well, which I'm sure we'll get into. And then I capped off the year, senior year, with sort of like trying to hit all of my Div 1 courses. So end up taking acting 101 and drawing and sort of all the nice things that after which you realize you should have done a lot more of. So it was a fantastic year, and I think an overall amazing experience being at Williams. Um, and if I ever got a chance, I'd totally do it again.
Yeah, that's great. And so my next question, which might be a slightly longer one, but can you just walk us through your journey from getting the idea to start Bondh-E-Shams and the entire process to the actual first glass of clean water being produced?
Yeah, so I think there are a few different facets to it, but the idea originates with this um, level of connection that I had with my home country, which is Pakistan. I was at Williams as an international student. I was well aware of that, and um, part of what I struggled with during my time at Williams was this very apparent sort of gap between the privilege that I saw in Pakistan and the one that I saw at Williams. And I come from a fairly good family. My father's a doctor. We had, all the bells and whistles that come with sort of having a supportive background in Pakistan. But even still, right? I think poverty, the way we define it and see it in Pakistan, looks very different from the way that we see it in the US. So I was very aware of that gap. And part of that was me being connected to my village as well, my ancestral village, where I saw the water crisis. I knew about it growing up. Never really thought I could do much about it, right? Like whenever you think of these big picture problems, not just about the world, but even to your specific community, it almost seems impossible to do something about it. Um, and I remained that state until I saw this opportunity come up called the Davis Projects for Peace, who award, I think, one or two people from Williams every year, or at least it historically did, to run a peace resolution project, a conflict resolution project, um, somewhere in the world with a $10,000 grant. And I saw it as an opportunity to go to them and say, look, like conflict conventionally defined does not capture sort of the reality of a lot of communities in developing countries. Like, yes, of course, there's physical warfare and fights and gunfights and all those things in certain parts of the world, which you're trying to target with this program. But what's probably far more important are all the communities living without access to basic resources. And the one that I've picked was water, because I realized that everything literally just starts with water, right? You can go 3 days without eating food, not without water. And there are these kids that I've seen pictures and videos of, as everybody else might have um, of kids walking long distances to fetch water. And when you're sitting at a place of privileged like Williams, where you have literally, whatever resource you can possibly imagine, you have an indirect or direct connection to it at Williams. And I understand, a lot of us come from a different financial background, but the institution as a whole is able to give platform to a lot of well-meaning folks. I would consider myself one of them who had an opportunity via that. So I think the idea really went from saying, okay, I see this gap, I want to do something about it. There's a program at Williams, let me apply for it. Applied for it, back and forth, back and forth. The committee was like, no, this is not really peace, like this is not peacemaking, this is not conflict resolution. And then there was the dean of international student at Williams at the time. She really pushed hard. Jennifer Hassenfuss, she pushed hard. She went back, kind of back and forth, back and forth. And then they were like, okay, fine, here's the money, go do something. Maybe you'll come back with some pictures. And I was like, great. Number one, now I have something for the summer. That was part of the motivation, was trying to figure out like, the hell am I going to do this summer, because I'm at Oxford. By the time I get back, I'm not going to have any internships. So I was trying to bridge that gap as well. Went back home, did the first project. It was far more successful than I could have possibly imagined, both in terms of people who got excited for it, so all the volunteers I had, but also the people that we were able to impact. And the idea around it was to say, let's create a sustainable source of clean water for these people. And we'll, I'm sure, get into the tech side of it as well. But the conclusion of my time in Pakistan ended with people whom I never thought I could do anything for having access to clean water. Uh, Within 8 weeks of me getting the money and deploying it in a way which made sense and was smart, me coming back, showing the committee what I'd achieved, and my friends encouraging me, and there was like a lot of goodwill around it. Um, and I think from there on out, what's happened is it kind of sort of quieted down a little bit, because senior year, you're focused, you're trying to get a job, all those things. Um, and then before I tell you how I ended up balancing that, the journey from there to where we are today, I'll take a pause and let you ask the next question.
Yeah, so I just want to, learn a little bit more about the exact technology you use to provide clean water. So I believe it's called the Oasis box. So can you tell us, how do you come up with that idea, and can you explain how that technology works?
Sure. So I think it was very much a Williams-esque approach to solving a problem, which is, okay, I see a complex problem, and I don't know much about engineering per se, except for the 12 years of, up to high school, I did sort of physics and chemistry and all the hard sciences. Um, but I can see there's something I can do about it, because the world we live in now, with access to kind of technological resources and connections, and the ease with which we can learn about a new subject, especially in the Williams context, where you literally learn about 6 things a week, and in a fairly in-depth scenario. I said, let me take this on as a project, try to figure out what I can do. And there it was basically saying, fine, the end product that I'm trying to get to is a sustainable source of clean water. What are the problems to it? Number one, you need to pump water from deep underground aquifers. Okay, fine. If I want to do that, I need to have a motor that can pump from that. Okay, fine. That's part one. I'll go find out about motors. Number two, I need a source of power. Okay, well, you could use electricity, but in a lot of these developing countries, including Pakistan, especially at the time, electricity was a big issue. A lot of these rural communities had maybe electricity for 8 hours a day, so you can't really, so you need something sustainable. So we ended up going for solar. Great, that's another piece solved. The third one is to figure out how you can basically sort of make sure the water is filtered as well, because a lot of these communities will end up pumping the water and end up getting sick still, because the water is contaminated with E. coli, cholera, and 1,000 other bad things. So we need to figure out about filtration. So it was basically dissecting the problem into its constituent parts and trying to figure out what I knew about each, and then trying to basically take it the next step forward. Um, And that's how we did the first project, because it was very piecemeal. It was very, kind of like it's like almost like a monster that you're putting together, and the things don't really look nice. They don't really fit well, but it gets the job done. So it was very much a prototype project. Um, and then I think this goes back to what I did when I got back to Williams, which is the project kind of like was like, fine, this, Frankenstein that I set up is working and it's getting clean water. People are happy, it's working well. Um, but then the question became, fine, if I want to do this on a long-term basis, and the problem that I'm trying to solve is not just for my village, it is the global water crisis where there are 1.2 billion people affected by it, then I need something which is scalable, something transportable, something which can be shipped, packed, and sent anywhere in the world. So that became another problem that I was trying to solve. So we ended up packaging all those constituent parts into what we call the Oasis box, which is now completely solar powered, has cutting edge filtration, which can filter out 99.9999% of all bacterial contaminants. It can provide up to 10,000 liters of clean water per community every day, which is around 40,000 cups of clean water. And the nice thing there is, and this is what we've done very recently, is we've connected it to the internet, both via, either via satellite or via 3G. And what you can do now is, in fact, if you go on our website, you can see the live cups of clean water delivered each day in each of the communities that we've served. And we've been counting those out in a fairly transparent manner. And we've provided something like 35 million cups of clean water today, which is, I think, if I look back to the fall of 2014 versus today, it's been, 5-6 years, but the impact is pretty massive for the kind of team that we have. So I think that's the gist of the technology and kind of what it can achieve.
Yeah, that's really amazing. So you mentioned that you've done 35 million glasses of clean water to date. Could you just speak a little bit more about the impact on how many different countries and communities have you touched, and about how many people do you think have benefited from Bondh-E-Shams?
Yeah, sure. So I think there are two ways in which I think about impact. The first one, before we can reach these communities that need clean water, of course, they're the end users, they're the customer, if you will. There's a second layer of impact, which I think happens within sort of my peer network. So folks like myself who were looking to make an impact, who were almost had a vacuum of purpose in their day job or whatever else they were doing, and they're trying to align themselves to a purposeful activity. Then I think that's a key part of making the impact, which is you align those folks with the mission, give them purpose as well, and use the resources they want to offer to then multiply and magnify the impact, right? So as a standalone entity, as a person, there's a limited amount of work that I can do. And especially within the impact and nonprofit space, that's very focused, because it's not like you're trying to set up an online business to just like e-commerce and like the same one person can do it. It's not trading where you can just sit at home and make millions. It is impact work. You need to go visit places, you need to understand problem. It's very applied. So you need a big team, or you need a team that is very efficient at least. And so, the first layer of impact is we brought in people. We have a team of 5-6 people in the US, we've 4 of us in the UK, we've got a team of 10-15 people in Pakistan. And then we have 100 plus volunteers spread across the world. And I think beyond that, then when you talk about the impact, we've done, I believe, 17 projects now across sort of Pakistan, South Sudan, and we've just fired off 2 of the Oasis boxes to Yemen this week. So the work continues to follow. We're thinking of doing 4 installations in the refugee camps for the Rohingya refugee camps in Bangladesh and Cox's Bazar. There's some interest to do projects in Tanzania. So the total number of people that I think we've touched to date is around 50,000. And I think, we're continuing to grow that number by the day. And I think, by the way, like, this is a good juncture to just mention that for all the folks who, students, young professionals who want to get involved, I think it's a fantastic opportunity to to make remote impact as well, because a lot of the work we do can be done remotely, and then of course we have an on-field team um, that gets involved as well.
Yeah, that's a really good message. And on the summit website, we'll have links to your website and the volunteer opportunities. And you alluded to this earlier, but you started Bondh-E-Shams as a student, and now you are vice president at Goldman Sachs. So how do you balance running a global nonprofit with these other obligations?
So I think you give up all hope of having any kind of other outside activity, basically is part of the answer, at least when you're kicking it off initially, right? Like, because when I began this work, I was at Williams, and Williams, you guys all know how demanding it can be, right? Then it was Goldman Sachs. So Williams, in a sense, prepared me well for the kind of challenges of sort of balancing a few things out that I wanted to care for. The first 2 years of any juncture, any sort of venture, are extremely difficult. They're very time intensive because you're on your own. You haven't been able to convince other people yet to join on board in a mass scale. The resources need to be very carefully allocated because every dollar matters, and it's coming more for the most part from your own pocket. So the first 2 years between when I began work, so 2015 through I would say 2017, mid 2017, were very focused. I spent a lot of my weekends at home working on the project. I spent most of my evenings at home working on the project. Through the day, every chance I got, I was texting and telling people about it. Um, but then things plateau a little bit. One, you build the muscle memory to be able to do a lot of things quickly and efficiently. You're able to build processes around it if you're smart about it, which all Williams folks are. And then people, when they see the kind of effort that you're putting in, are able to join in and kind of help you as well. So the nice thing for me has been, especially over the last 2 years, I sit as the vice president at within the macro sales team on the trading floor. So I do sales for interest rate derivatives, basically, which is very intense in the moment kind of role. So when you begin work at whatever early in the morning, 7:30, and then you're working through sort of the early evening, at least till 6, 7, whatever it is. But when the market closes, you can sort of take a foot off the pedal as well, which means if you have other interests, you can sort of like, at least you have a couple more hours in the day to try and focus on those. But I think the balance really is that, yes, you can time manage across a few different functions, but the crux of it is the X factor is how passionate you are about running and setting up that business. Like, there are days where I was so frustrated, so tired. I've been working my ass off for like weeks on end. I don't see the light at the end of the tunnel because it's a long process. People aren't really buying into it. And I keep asking for donation and people aren't donating, and I'm trying to look for fun. But the passion keeps you going. Like, there was literally a night I remember in 2016 where I sat down and I said, why am I doing this? You kind of like, go into this existential angst of trying to figure out like why you're doing what you're doing. And I convinced myself that the reason that I was doing it with a lot of clarity was because I wanted to make impact. I wanted to see a lot of people sort of finding their capabilities for the work that we're doing and helping create the kind of impact where people could uplift themselves. And I think that stayed with me, which is when you have that kind of almost exaggerated passion for what you're trying to do, whether that be within the nonprofit space or whether that be the business venture that you're looking at as an entrepreneur, like, you need to exude very, very proactively your passion and your interest. And when you do, you will also find a lot of people, the right people finding you, and then helping make things a little bit easier for you as well.
Yeah, that's extremely inspiring. And you did mention that, there are probably a lot of challenges on the way, but could you focus on if there's any specific moment where you faced failure that this venture might not work out, and how did you overcome it?
I think with these big ventures, or with things which have become a little bit more successful, and I would count Bondh-E-Shams as one. the success often tends to overshadow the failures that came along with it. Because it's almost like with most businesses, like the ends justify the means, right? Like where all's end that ends well kind of situation. But there were a lot of those moments, if I'm honest. I think one that I can recall was, like I think as a founder, you're obviously convinced that something that you have is life changing, and all founders are. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing what they're doing. Um, and I went up to, so there's a competition within Goldman, called the Analyst Impact Fund, where charities around the world can pitch for money, and the top prize is $150,000, and that's a lot of money, right? Especially for a nonprofit, and a nonprofit that I care for. And I was very passionate. I was like, look, I want to do this. Like, I'm gonna pitch for this. I'm an analyst at Goldman. Like this, the stars are aligned, and I think I should win because like look at all the impact that we make, and like so many people we can help with so little money, and like it's 25 years and da da da. Like I had my list of reasons. This was 2018. No, sorry, this was 2017. We pitched. We got to we made it to the top 30. And then the next round is top six. And we made it to top 30 and then we got cut out. And I was like really sad. I was like, oh, like I saw that email pop up in my inbox and I was like, this is really heartbreaking. Like I closed my shop and I went home and I was like, oh, I'm really upset and like, let me go hang out with some friends and da, da, da. and and it's like it's in those moments where there's almost like a sort of a fork in the road. Either you, and I don't want to be the cliche of like like your failures like build you up and that they do, sure, but in a very applied sense, when you're the person looking at something which hasn't panned out the way you wanted it to, there are one or two ways to think about it, right? Like one is to say, okay, like I tried my best, this didn't work. Maybe it's not worth for me to continue putting the effort because I'm not getting the results that I need. And that's a logical way of approaching it. But then there's the crazy way of approaching it, right? Which is like, I mean, the code that you might have seen on Instagram a few times, like Einstein defining madness of like trying the same thing over and over and again and expecting different results. Like that sounds stupid, but it's actually the way I see it. I don't find that stupid. Like sometimes it takes you knocking on the same door several times and just like reconfiguring your pitch and your approach for you to see the results. And that's what happened for us. Like because I told you earlier, right? Like for me, the passion overcomes and overshadows everything else. Like I really want to make this happen. So I'm going to try again. So I looked at all the things that maybe have led to our downfall in this competition. I said, you know what, next year I'm going to apply again. And I'm going to think about what went wrong, how the pitch could have been different. And we did. We applied again the following year, 2018. I got a different team together. I worked harder on it. I reconfigured the pitch. I made it more impactful. This time around, we made it to the top 30. We made it to the top six. We then made it, the top six get to present in front of the partnership committee and thousands of other people, and the pitch is on YouTube as well. And my pitch literally kicked off, and this I think why we sort of did well, but it picked off by saying, like 1 in 10 people do not lack access to clean water, and how many of you have faced that? And in the room I raised my hand because I had and nobody else did, and kind of like it connected with folks. Anyways, long story short, we ended up winning. Like we ended up coming the first, getting the first prize in that competition, ended up getting $100,000. And I think that has been, to me, in a sort of in a nutshell, the way that we've approached these problems. Like there have continued to be folks who don't believe in the mission, who don't think what you're doing is smart, who are naysayers, who put you down. But if you're crazy enough, you keep trying, and I think then the proof is in the pudding, basically.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for that. That was definitely a very inspiring story. And so I feel like a lot of students might say, they care about, things like peace. They care about things like bringing access to clean water to people all around the world. These are big global issues that people will say they care about, but it might be a lot of students might feel like it's hard to do anything. They'll say, I'm just a student in a dorm room in Williamstown. How could I possibly make any impact? So I just want to know, like, what made you feel like as one individual in the dorm room that you could have this huge impact, in across the world, or even, just run a, nonprofit that spans international borders?
It's a good question, and I think I think part of what I have to acknowledge at the forefront of it is, different people are wired differently. So we all approach those moments differently. And I think for me, fortunately, I'm wired as an optimist. I'm wired as a hopeful, as an idealist, as somebody who thinks he can achieve far more um, than often the confines and your circumstances will define. I mean, the acceptance rate for international students at Williams is, I think, less than 7% or something, right? So like being at Williams as an international student with a decent scholarship was already like something which had set me apart from my peers before. So I had faced those moments before where you kind of like, look at the odds and still fight them and you do well. Um, and I think part of it also is that oftentimes, right, like you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Like before I founded Bondh-E-Shams, I tried reaching out to a lot of other people whom I thought I could possibly help build the mission with. Um, and the reason we ended up founding a new thing was because what we're doing had just not been done before. Like it didn't exist. There weren't a lot of people talking about solar powered remote filtration units that can go, sit anywhere in the world within 7 minutes and start delivering clean water. It just didn't exist as a product. So we wanted to create something new. But I think to students looking at any kind of problem which seems outsized or which seems too big, um, part of it is reaching out to the Williams network. There are a lot of really smart alums who have done well in their fields. Not necessarily your field, like the one that you're trying to solve the problem on, but like if a student contacts me and wants to talk about Bondh-E-Shams and like what I did differently, I think there are lessons to be learned there across any kind of business that you're trying to set up, right? So like learn from applied sort of actions of folks who've come before you, number one. To study and understand the problem in depth. Like I think what is, and this is what I realized like 6 years out of Williams is, as a student, like when you pick and learn a topic and you write a paper on it, and you sometimes like some of us feel like then experts on the topic and others like, oh of course, but like I've only researched for a week or like a month, how could I be the expert? Oftentimes you're actually far ahead of most people who speak about that topic, right? Like when I was writing about, as an example, like the sort of I was writing a research paper on foreign, actually drone strikes in Pakistan. That was my research project. I was going to do a thesis on it, and I researched that topic for months, was on the ground, did some work, but I always felt like, oh, but like there must be people, a lot of people who know far more about this than I do. And looking back, there aren't, because when you pick a topic as a Williams student and you really get to the bottom of it, you often know a lot more. So do the research of any of these things, become the quasi expert, and then sort of just take a step back, chart out your journey in maybe 5 steps, with a fifth step of being at least 50% of the way to your product or whatever your end goal is. And then just keep dissecting it into its constituent parts, and then just take the first step. Like a lot of times, like what I've seen happen with our work, for example, is you you take the leap of faith, and then you start building the stairway along the process. Like I will go and say I want to do X, like I want to sort of reach out to the Goldman Sachs Analyst Impact Fund and raise money, but I have nothing to do that with, except that I know the process, and then I will get a team together, and then when I speak with the team, they'll actually say like, actually you should do X, Y, and Z, and then you just reconfigure and reprocess your trajectory. So I think the most important thing to keep in mind is like, yes, are you actually truly passionate, and will your passion sustain you through the hard times? If that is a yes, then can you study the product and break it down into consistent parts, yes, then just take the next step. Like just take the leap of faith and then, let things unfold.
Yeah, I think that perfectly just fits the whole entrepreneurial theme of this entire summit. And so, just curious, what's your vision for Bondh-E-Shams in the future?
It's quite simple actually, which is there are 1.2 billion people without clean water, and we want to reach every single one of them. Simple as that. Like we're not shy about the impact that we want to create. Yes, there are thousands of other charities trying to do well, focus on water. We want to work with them. There are tons of people who want to assist. Absolutely, everybody's welcome on board. But the mission we're on will touch, 1/8 or 1/7 of the world's population. It's simple as that. Like we're not gonna stop anything shy of it, right? Like I could be 65 and still working on it. If it's like there are people without clean water, and there always unfortunately will be from the looks of it, we're gonna be fighting and trying to create something, either in terms of the technological advance, or in terms of the impact that we can create. As an example, this Ramadan, which is a holy month of fasting in Islam, we're launching a campaign to bring 1 million people clean water in Pakistan. And it's an ambitious project because we've obviously, I mentioned, like we reached maybe 50,000 so far, but we're aiming big because we have the technology, we have the focus, we've got the right team involved, and now just a matter of convincing people who have the money to assist us and take it to the next level. So I think, like, whilst I have other things in my life that I want to achieve, and I'll continue to balance it out with a family life and other uh, sort of purposes that I might have, I think I will constructively working within the water space for the foreseeable future, and get it as close to that vision as possible.
Yeah, and so when you think about the global water crisis, do you think that projects like Bondh-E-Shams is going to be the way forward to solve this on a large scale, or do you think something else needs to happen on an international or national government level really support this and help solve this problem once and for all?
Yeah, I think it's one reflecting on. So in a TED talk I gave in North Adams 2018, the point I made was, or 2019 actually, the point I made was there cannot be one person or one nonprofit that solves the global water problem. It's just not going to work that way. You need a strong international water policy framework that leverages government to government connections. It leverages the resources that the government collects from us as taxes to in pursuit of solving this big problem. Um, However, corporations, big corporations, or governments are naturally, um, for the most part, non-entrepreneurial. They do not get paid to have cutting edge technology. They do not get paid to do disruptive work. They're often in the business of sustaining what's working well or improving what's not working well with like things that have been tested and tried. Like, and even as a citizen, you would likely, for the most part, not necessarily particularly pleased if your government, um, especially in a developing country, deployed 100 million of its resources in a technology that hasn't been tried and tested before. Like, I understand that. So what we have to do is, as a nonprofit, is introduce disruptive technologies, prove the footprint, get to scale, oftentimes without the help of governments, and then yes, it leverages and creates a platform where a lot of people feel a lot more empowered to join in. Which is, by the way, I think, like, whenever I speak about this work, yes, we're a nonprofit and we're creating technology and we're trying to help people, but I think of us more as a movement than a nonprofit. It is dialogues like this where we further the cause by discussing what can be done, what are the limitations, what else needs to happen in the future. And I think that's important because part of what differentiates Bondh-E-Shams is we are attempting to, at least for the moment, build a very strong volunteer base of hundreds of thousands of people who are aligned to the mission, right, and to the cause. Whether or not they're able to deliver or speak with somebody every day is not important. What's important is they register, they give their name, they say, look, like I align with this mission. And maybe not now, but in 3 months from now or 6 months from now, when I'm working and I have a paycheck, I want to be contributing a little bit to this cause. And if you think about it, like that's how you build movements and that's how you solve the big issues in the world. You don't do it by just like inventing a technology and deploying it, but you do it by convincing millions and millions and billions of people that this is important. Everybody needs to, same with climate change, for instance, right? Like we all know and feel that we want to work towards solving it. And this is a similar thing where like, you know, we want to get to a place where people feel empowered that they're trying to solve the global water crisis, and Bundeshams becomes the platform for them to voice an active change in that process.
Yeah, and you've given us an extreme amount of knowledge and insight today. I just wanted to know if there's any advice that you would give current Williams students who just feel broadly they want to have an impact and they just don't know what to do or how.
So I would say that, look, like, if you're listening to this message and if you're involved with the Williams Summit and with the team, you're already doing something which is worth praising, and that you're trying to sort of work on self-improvement. You're working on creating and founding or becoming part of something which is different than the norm. That's a very good sign. Um, there is a lot of oftentimes work on the self that's needed before you fully launch to your full progress. I'm certainly still a work in progress. And then you make sure that you have sort of like one hand up where you're trying to like reach to the next goal, but like always definitely one hand to the folks who need your help to get to where you are, right? You want to build a chain of folks who are able to make an impact. Um, and I think at Williams, yes, there is a lot of disparity between the privileges that we enjoy, even within the Williams context, but as a collective, the institution, like I said before, offers you a leverage, offers you a level of, and I keep circling back to the word privilege, because you have access to resources that can shape and change a lot of things and a lot of dialogue. And you're smart and you're well versed and you know how to think about problems. So I think what you can do likely is, and this is probably what my standard piece of advice for anybody who has this conversation now is, like, identify the top three things you want to look different in the world, right? Like just three, not 10, not five, three things that you care deeply about as causes. It can't be, I want to make more money. It can't be, I want to have like a Lamborghini. It can't be that I want to like spend 6 months in Bali. Like those things will come if you develop your footprint or business or whatever. Like they're different from the purpose-filled activities. So it might be I want to end racism. It might be that I want to make sure that the polar ice caps stop melting. It might be that I want to make sure that everybody who wakes up every morning has access to clean water, right? So like there are, I would say, at least 50 causes worth choosing from. Pick your top three and then start donating um, at least an hour of your time every week to each of those three causes, right? And like that's just 3 hours of your life every week. But if you think about it, over the course of a year, you'll have spent at least 150 hours trying to do something meaningful. And I think what you'll discover over time is, of those three, two will fall off and you'll be focused on one for the most part, because you'll realize that of the three, this is one where you care about a lot of things. Of course I care about ending racism, of course I care about climate change, of course I care about carbon emissions, but I've chosen water because I know like that's the one which. So pick your one cause and then just close your eyes and just like head towards it in any way you can, right? Like when you're spending 3 hours every week on a cause, it can involve you know writing some piece of research, doing a podcast, interviewing people, donating to the folks that you think are doing good work. It could involve you sort of like volunteering with an organization for 3 hours a week. So like there's 1,001 things you can do, but I think if more of us start just working on this like 3 hours, three organizations framework every week, I think we'll find that we can actually have a very active impact far quicker than we would by sort of like, you know, relying on current governments to change their policy framework. And I think that's the power of the masses. I think that's the power of impact. And I think like for anybody listening to this message in particular, like if you want help building that framework, I would say like get involved with Bondh-E-Shams for sure. You know, even if your one of your three doesn't involve water, because like this is how I approach problem solving. Like you will learn from way we build the organization, because this is like we try to be very systematic. We try to be very scalable and, you know, like create leverage for not just the people who want to help, but all the people, like I said before, who are helping us help other people, right? Like, you know, me helping find you some purpose-filled activity is also creating impact, in a sense different than you know, you coming on board and help create impact for other people. So I think that's probably where I'd leave it.
Yeah, I think you know, if everyone watching this really took 1 hour on something they cared about, they definitely could have. We could collectively have a really large impact, and I think that is an excellent message to end on. Thank you so much, Hamza. Yeah, I encourage any students interested in helping out to go to Bondh-E-Shams' website and learn more and see how you can get involved. We really appreciate you taking the time today.
Absolutely, Christian. Thank you very much.